Well, greetings and salutations, everybody. Welcome to AMC Movie News' special review, non-spoilers review of the brand new Avengers Age of Ultron. We are actually recording this the night that we saw it on, what is it, April 9th?
April 9th, Thursday,
April 9th. We all just saw it tonight. We're all very excited about it, and we're here to share that excitement with you. Joining me, of course, on the end there is Mark Ellis. Right here, of course, is Amy Rose Eisenbach, Mr. Christian Harloff, and John Schnepp over way yonder. So we just saw Avengers Age of Ultron. I'm going to tell you right now, my expectations got too high for this movie. They did, like the last week and a half, I've done a really good job of keeping my expectations in check until the last week and a half. My expectations were too high, which then left me with, I'm going to walk out really disappointed because nothing can live up to the expectations that I have going in. And I'll tell you right now, we'll get into the positives and negatives in a second, but for me, they lived up to my expectations. Now, is it better? This is what everybody's going to ask. As soon as I say that I really love the movie, people are going to ask, was it better than the first Avengers? My jury is still out on that. I need to see this movie. Schnepp and I were just talking about this. I need to see this movie like one or two more times to really determine that. But the very fact that I'm even having the conversation about comparing it to the first Avengers says a lot, considering I thought the first Avengers was the best comic book movie I've ever seen. But anyway, let's start with some of the things that we thought worked without getting into spoiler territory. This is new for us. Mark, let's start with you. What are some of what worked for you in this movie?
The opening worked really well for me.
Awesome.
This thing kicked off like a rock concert where the band comes on stage, you see all the members that you know and love, and that action sequence to open this movie was just mind-blowing, and bam, we're locked into this sequel. I liked the relationships between each characters, I liked how they were developing a little bit, particularly between Captain America and Iron Man, Hulk and Black Widow, and then you also had things for Hawkeye and Thor to do that I never even expected. Then you talk about the villain Ultron. I think finally we got the best test yet for this team in any of the individual films or in the first Avengers.
Schnepp, let's ship over to you. The things you liked about this film.
Things I liked the most was the Vision and Ultron and them and their scenes together. I thought that was fantastically done, and it was really fully realized. And there's that Whedon flavor, just the dialogue, James Spader, combining that. They gave a weighty villain to something that might not, I was a little wary of whether it would work or not, even though I love the trailers. And I think it worked fantastic. So that's one of my favorite parts of the film.
Christian?
Ultron. I thought he was the best. I thought, because I didn't know what to expect from him. I just knew he was going to be a menacing villain, but he had so much more, and because of what James Spader brought to it, and because of how he was created, and the sense of humor that he had, honestly, it was really my favorite part of the whole movie. And it wasn't like, they're giving the robot jokes. No, because that's a part of what his personality was, and I thought he was a good test to the Avengers and the team dynamic, the way that they work. And I also like the further development of Hawkeye. That to me was one of my favorite moments because he's always been the guy like, what's Hawkeye doing there? They even kind of crack on that in this movie. And I thought that the way that he was developed with the other little things that we hadn't seen before really worked for me.
Yeah, some of the things that really stood out to me. Number one, the action right from the beginning. And it's not a spoiler to let you know that scene in the Jeep where you see the Jeep in the wintry background forest and everybody jumping out of the Jeeps. Right. That's like the opening scene of the movie. It's like bang, like a rocket. Just the movie just gets out of it. One of the things I was concerned about for this movie after watching just the first trailer was that where's the fun, the humor, the lightheartedness? You can have all the deep stuff, but for this to be a Marvel movie, you got to have that other stuff too. In spades. Some of the one-liners were incredibly funny. I found myself laughing a lot throughout the film at all the right times and the right points and stuff like that. Somebody else already mentioned the Hawkeye thing. Hawkeye, who was kind of shortchanged a bit in the first Avengers movie, I personally thought as a result was kind of expendable. They really give him his due in this movie. They actually almost do more character development with him than any other character in it. And then, of course, Ultron. I mean, with Ultron, one of my fears about Ultron was he was just going to be the menacing, unbeatable bad guy. Ultron is far more human than you would think. And he has far more human mannerisms in this film than you think. And that's actually a good thing. That's a positive thing. It adds a new layer to him, his motivation, and also just his entertainment values on. Vision, they crushed it. I was worried about Vision because Vision looks ridiculous. I mean, he does. Vision looks ridiculous. He does. But the way they handled it, the way Paul Bettany, brought Jarvisisms into it while still making him a unique entity at the same time was really cool. And I got to agree with you, Schnepp. That scene, several scenes that we see between Vision and Ultron.
Spoiler
I'm not saying anything. There are scenes between Vision and Ultron.
Guys.
There are scenes between Vision and Ultron. They're both in the movie. Not a big surprise. Were quite well done. Really, really excellent. And somebody else mentioned the camaraderie, the chemistry between the characters. I thought they did a better job on interpersonal chemistry in this movie than I think they did in the first one, by quite a bit. So those are some of the things that really stand out to me that I really loved about it. Amy Rose, what about you?
The scale. A lot of the times with a sequel, a lot of the times with a sequel, you know, you're worried that they're going to just try to hit all the same points as the original film, but they didn't. Everything was bigger, more action-packed, further developed. They really continued with the storyline. They weren't just doing the Hangover 2 treatment where it's like, okay, here you go now. So I do think that it just felt bigger in every way, and just it was a huge production. What I love so much about Whedon in general with this world is the dialogue. I mean, it's so witty and fun and cheesy at times, but you love it. And the audience, seeing this film with a huge audience that wants to all be there so badly, is part of the fun because we laugh on cue. We're eating out of the palm of their hands. So I feel like it's all timed really well. And you're right, from all the trailers we saw, I thought it is darker, definitely darker, but there is enough humor where the MCU has really distinguished itself. So I just thought it was a really fun, intense time. I like a lot of the new characters. Vision, yes, definitely. Yeah. But Hawkeye, I mean, we got to give it up to our boy again because, you know, I feel like Whedon made it up to him because the first one, I mean, mind control and just, he never really had a chance to show us what he was made of. And I'm not going to go into spoiler territory, but he was perfect in this film. Exactly what I wanted to see. And I want to talk about details, but I'm not going to.
I'll add one more thing that I should have added before. I'll say right up front, the Maximoff twins, I did not like them at first. I did not like them at first, but then we started to see what Whedon's vision for them was as the film progressed. And by the time we got about 3/4 way through the movie, I'm like, yeah, I started to get kind of happy when I would see them on screen. So that's another thing that worked for me. All right, let's go talk quickly then about some of the things that maybe didn't work for us. Without going into spoiler territory, Christian, let's start with you. What are some of the things that maybe it didn't live up to its potential?
Bad Russian accents.
You didn't see that coming?
Well, I don't understand. Why are you saying that?
Russian
accent?
You
Did
enjoy
it change
vodka?
over the course of the
Vodka?
2.5
I think
hours?
everybody agrees. Yes, that was one of the things. Some of it was a little repetitive. I felt like I saw a lot of it in the first movie. I thought that the end sequence, particularly, was more. It seemed very familiar to the first movie, where we've done it. Oh, that beat was in the first one. That beat was there, and it went on for a bit. Even though, look, like Amy Rose said, this is an event summer film. It absolutely is, and you enjoy it, and you're on the edge of your seat. But if we're talking about the things I didn't like, that's absolutely one of them. And sometimes things seemed a little bit too convenient. And I also wanted to see more, and I know that I'm going to disagree here, but I wanted to see a little more setup to Civil War. And I'm not going to go into too much of it, but I wanted to see more of that because we're going to get there. And I felt like I was let go of that. And then you and I talked about this beforehand, was at the end of Iron Man 3, like, what happens with the end of Iron Man 3?
This is one of my big ones.
And at the end of Iron Man 3, they say Tony Stark is done. He's going to drive off, and we don't know what happens. And then it just starts off, and he's fighting with the Avengers, like, no explanation whatsoever. And like, nah, you don't need it. But
yeah, see, I assumed that from the end of Iron Man 3, that Avengers would start with Tony having been retired, and then because of the Ultron threat, puts back on the Iron Man suit. But no, the movie starts with that scene we were talking about, and Iron Man's just fighting alongside them. We're all like, oh, okay, so Tony came back? Is that what happened? Like, they just left it hanging like that.
I think they lost. That's where we talked about Hawkeye and even Vision, even Ultron getting development. I think because we're so familiar with the characters of the regular Avengers, that they stayed away from developing them further.
All right, so Schnapp, what about you? Some of the things that maybe didn't live up to the potential for you.
Well, it's weird. When Tobey Maguire showed up as Spider-Man, I was like, what the?
Spoilers, man. Spoilers.
Oh, spoilers! Schnapp.
Wait, just edit that out, Dennis. Edit it out.
Edit.
Yeah, some of the things that, look, like we were talking about this, how difficult it is to even have an opinion, because this is a movie that's onto its own, it's fighting itself. It's like Age of Ultron is fighting the first Avengers, and then everything else is kind of underneath it, like, you know, eating the crumbs from these movies that are like giant super spectacles. I really enjoyed this film. As a comic book fan, I was giddy. I was smiling and laughing through the majority of the film. I felt there were a few moments sprinkled around that just kind of felt a little bit like they were giving way too much information, and then, all right, I'm into it, and then it didn't pay off. So there were a lot of things that were setting up, and like you said, they didn't really do a lot of setup, and that's not a spoiler. They didn't do a lot of setup for Civil War, but they did a lot of other setup, and I just don't know when that's going to, you know, pay off, so to speak, you know, it just felt like there was some moments in it that weren't as, you know, as much as I wanted them to be. So, you know, it's a trade-off. I mean, there were also incredible moments in this film that I'm still happy about. I mean, you know, it's a fantastic film. I just think if I have to complain about one or two things, I think it was like a few of those quieter moments, they just didn't get into they didn't hit it the way I was hoping. And it's not my film, but you know, it's like whatever.
Ooh, one more other positive thing I thought about. Andy Serkis is
Yeah, I didn't know that was a spoiler.
well, as Claw. Well, I mean, he's in the IMDb credits.
And he was fantastic.
And he was.
Yeah, so good. No, he's not Claw on
Is he?
IMDb.
I'm positive he
Oh
was.
wait,
No,
I'm
he's
sorry.
not.
Andy Serkis said he was Claw already.
Oh,
on,
yeah,
like,
yeah, that was-
on
yeah,
this
he had
London.
confirmed
He's
that.
like, isn't it out already?
But Andy, I was afraid Andy Serkis won't look menacing. Andy Serkis looks
Sure
menacing.
was.
So I like, anyway, going back to the negative things now. Mark, some of the things that maybe didn't have potential for you.
Well, I was disappointed in myself for eating not one, not two, but 3 buckets of popcorn.
Did you really do 3?
Did you
I
get
have
3?
no self-control
We did
whatsoever.
2. I did 2. You did 2.
I had
Look,
about one
I-
and a half.
This is one of the problems about. I'm not going to be fitting into that vision suit for
I am
Halloween like I
very proud
originally
of you,
intended.
Ellis.
There's not a lot else that I was really disappointed with this film. I think that I was expecting something a little different from the villain, and I loved what Ultron brought to the table. It didn't get as dark and it didn't get as deep as I thought it might, because I think everybody, when you walk into a sequel, you assume you're going to get something like Empire Strikes Back, where okay, we're going to give our heroes a different challenge, and maybe there's storm clouds that are even looming over the end of the film. What this did, it felt more like what the first Avengers did, which is it took all those first standalone movies in Phase 1 and it tied them up in a nice bow. And this sort of did that for that one, as opposed to just being another setup. But the more I'm thinking about that, I think that's actually a positive, that we can close the book on that. Because when Marvel did that announcement and they showed us, hey guys, look at all these movies we have coming out, we're like, that's going to lead into that, and that's going to lead into that. Sometimes it is nice to just read a comic book and just have some closure. And then we're going to see if they planted seeds that we didn't think about watching this movie when we see Civil War and when we see Infinity War, when, you know, all of our kids are giving us rides to go see that movie.
Let me mention
When
one
our
thing
kids are-
that you brought up is like one of the things where I thought they introduced a lot of stuff but didn't go into enough detail was Ultron. He just sort of shows up and then it's the threat.
I don't know. I felt good about him.
Yeah.
I felt good about his intro, personally myself, but there's probably going to be a lot of people that agree with you too once they see the movie.
Right.
Amy Rose, what about you? Some of the things that didn't live up to
I
potential.
actually completely agree. I mean, we heard from the synopsis and other things that, you know, Tony was going to be the creator of Ultron and da-da-da, and we heard all that, but I just thought it was kind of like little payoff with the creation. And I get it. It's a 2-hour and 15-minute movie.
Right.
They couldn't really drag on that, but I also was like, okay, that's it. I just wanted a little more why he went this route, why he went evil. It was just kind of in the span of a second. So I thought that wasn't necessarily a negative, but I would have liked more development. I think it would have made him stronger to really understand why he chose that path. I also thought it was a little less fun than the first one. Pretty much the entire film was one action scene. And I think that, you know, in that way, it kind of presents itself as a little uneven, because to give the audience a moment to catch their breath, like I think the first one did really well, it makes those action scenes even more impactful, because you had the moment to be like, oh, here it comes, here it comes. But there was no real buildup, because it pretty much was one action scene, which is really impressive, because that pace, the whole film was just so fast. I feel like there was a little more time for interaction and setup in the first one. So I think I had a little bit more fun with it, but the action scenes were pretty damn epic. I mean, Hulkbuster Iron Man with Hulk, that was a sick scene,
great
so that's
sequence.
bad.
And you've only seen a fraction of it. Like
Yeah.
the trailer, I
Right,
mean,
it's
it's
very
like
fun.
it is an explosive and very fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very fun. Like
Good reasoning why. Also.
Yeah.
It
Oh
makes
yeah.
sense, yeah.
And trust
the
us when we
setup, Civil
say
War.
the best scenes of this movie are not in the trailers.
No.
The
No.
best scenes in the movie.
Yeah.
For me, some of the things that didn't work, we talked a little bit. You mentioned the fact that the complete abandoning of any explanation about how did Tony come back to being Iron Man again. So I guess they decided to just abandon that, and we just got to accept that. That's fine. There's a part in the movie, I'm not going to say why, how, or when, but that Thor goes on a bit of a spirit quest that I thought really was dumb. So there's that.
Didn't go anywhere either.
No, it didn't
Like-
really go anywhere. It was
Kind of
anyway.
did.
Yeah.
I thought that Vision quest was important.
Okay. And then
your vision.
the once again, not setting up the how, where's, when's, or why's, but we were talking about it off camera. Nick Fury kind of does something in it that left me going, how is he doing this? A little bit. So you'll see what I mean when you see the movie. All right, let's wrap this thing up. Let's get into just quick general impression with a score out of 10. Mark, let's start with you.
I was really impressed by Avengers Age of Ultron. I thought the way that Joss Whedon tied in the sense of humor and the action was almost like watching Quicksilver, how quickly he moves. It would go from joke to Hugh Jackman sequence, back to joke, and back and forth.
I
the
said
entire
from joke
film.
to Hugh Jackman sequence.
Wolverine is in
Wolverine
this
is in
movie.
it.
Hugh
Spoilers.
Jackman sequence.
Wolverine is in it, guys.
I mean, it did feel like one giant action sequence, but it never felt like, for instance, The Hobbit, The Battle of the Five Armies, when that was one giant action sequence, and it just wasn't a whole lot of fun for me. This was a ball from start to finish. I'm sure that I'll start thinking about this film and the interactions between Ultron and the rest of the crew. I'm going to start to nitpick a little bit, but for right now, I had a great time at the movies. This was an awesome comic book film. It made me laugh. It blew me away. I am going to go 9.5 out of 10 for Avengers Age of Ultron.
All right, Amy Rose, general impression, overall score out of 10.
General impression, it definitely did not let me down. I had sky-high expectations as well, and I thought it was a really well-made movie. It continued the story, continued the development. The ensemble together, when they're all on screen, it's magic. It's so much fun. I do think that it was a little bit more uneven, a little less fun than the first one, but with that said, it's still better than most films being released. My one other disappointment that I didn't really mention with the twins, I think that they could have been better utilized, and maybe we'll see that a little more as it continues. But overall, I had a really great time. For comic book fans, this is what you want and more. I just think the first one was a little bit better. I'm going to give it a 9.
One more positive thing. Don Cheadle got some really good War Machine time.
yeah.
We're not going to go into any details, but actually some big thumbs up there. Okay, Schnepp, let's go to you. General impression score out of 10.
I did want to bring up one thing that none of us did. That I thought Natasha, Scarlett Johansson, her character Natasha was really well used in this film, and the stuff that you find out about her, I mean, I thought that was really good, and those scenes never were boring to me. So I
agree.
was very happy about. I mean, it's like you have so many characters. That's what, to me, I was like, they're gonna give this to these people and try to develop this storyline. So those were storylines that really worked and played through the whole film. For me, the Avengers was a magical moment to see all those characters together in a film. It's still one of my favorite all-time superhero films, The Avengers. This Age of Ultron, really fantastic sequel, incredible giddy laughter and fun and excitement. Comic book rips right off the page and thrown on the screen. Fantastic moments, slightly uneven, like you said. So I would have to give it a 9 out of 10. So I mean, it can't, to me, Avengers is a 10. So it's like, it's just a little bit under it, but I'm not disappointed. So you have to take that with, the consideration of like, you're talking to some deep nerds. And when we see this again with all the extra sweaties, people like who are freaking out and convulsing over specific scenes that maybe some of the people that we just saw with didn't read, they have never read the Avengers. So if you've actually read the comics, you're going to see a lot of extra stuff in there. So I'll give it a 9.
Christian.
I thought it was a super fun movie. I thought it was exactly what you want from an event comic book summer action film. The dynamic is still there. The chemistry is there. Robert Downey Jr. is still the star of this movie. Make no mistake about it. Chris Evans is stepping up. They all step up, and they're all the stars that they're making the money because they are so good. And to see this dynamic further was a lot of fun. Yeah, I had my problems with, I thought a lot of it seemed like the first one, and like Schnepp said, maybe because you were so fun the first time to see them all in Avengers 1 that when it happens again, you're almost kind of used to it. But I also think we have a high standard for these movies now to where you're like, it's got to be the best movie made. It's got to be a fun movie, and that's what this movie is. But I just had some problems with development, and I didn't like it as much as the first one. And to be honest, I like The Winter Soldier a little bit more because I felt that it had a little bit more depth. But I thoroughly enjoyed this movie, and I'm going to go 8 out of 10.
So many things that I loved from the movie, again, right out of the canon. I thought the action in this thing was a step up from the original one. I thought the character development and interactions was a little bit of a step up from the other one as well. I mean, and there's several things in the movie that start off slow for me that improve. We already talked about the Maximoff twins. Started off slow, it grew on me. I didn't quite buy into the Natasha, Dr. Banner kind of romance thing that we see alluded to in the trailers a lot, but it grows on me throughout and eventually ends up playing an important role for something important that happens down the line. This was a movie that I was kind of rocking back and forth in my seat a little bit. I found myself clapping my hands a couple of times throughout the thing, feeling really excited, wanting to shake the people beside me, but not wanting to make them feel uncomfortable. All that kind of stuff. I loved every second of this movie. I really did. I had just a great time watching it. All the things that bothered me, notwithstanding, that I mentioned a little bit earlier. So for right now, ask me again after I've seen it 2 more times. For right now, I will do a 9 out of 10 for for the Avengers Age of Ultron.
One more thing I forgot is, without saying what, there is one post-credit scene.
Yes, we've
and
talked about an AMC Movie Talk before.
Yes, it is awesome. I
Yeah.
loved it. I thought that was I thought
from
it
a
was
company that knows how to do post-credit scenes well. They've done a lot of really good ones over the years. This might be my favorite.
Yes,
Wow.
but don't wait around till the end
No,
credits.
just
Joss
that
Whedon, Kevin Feige
tag.
have already announced there's no post end credit scene. So once you see the one kind of the tag that comes shortly after the credits begin, then you're
People
The
safe
will
to
gaffing
live.
was
Right.
terrific.
Oh, sure.
Okay, with the best boy grip was awesome. You need to know that guy's name.
All right, that'll do it for us, guys. That has been our our review of Avengers: Age of Ultron. Now we're gonna do also a spoilers review after the movie releases. So if you want to hear us talk a little bit more in depth and go in all the spoilery stuff, once you've seen it, then you can sit around. I'm sure that one's gonna be like an hour and a half long, probably. Come back and join us then.
For our 4-hour session.
So for Mark Ellis, for Amy Rose Eisenbach, for Christian Harloff, for the one and the only John Schnepp, my name's John Campia for AMC Movie News. Thanks for joining us, guys, and until next time, bye-bye.